Hi, I'm Serena Simmons and welcome to 8 Model Psychology. Today I'm going to be talking to you about motivation. Did you know that even lazy people, and I mean really lazy people, are actually very motivated? Maybe you can think of people in your life that you consider to be lazy. Now consider the psychology behind that, because on face value it looks like they are lazy and they have no impetus or drive to do anything. But actually, research tells us that there's a lot going on behind the scenes when it comes to motivation. Arnold 2005 said, "People are usually motivated to do something, even if that means doing nothing." There's a lot of motivation behind the desire to stay still and stagnant and lazy. Now, we've all felt this at one time or another. As I said at the start, I feel lazy sometimes and lack motivation, and I'm sure you have too. So today I want to share with you 7 tips that are going to help you, give you insight into kind of where that feeling of lack of motivation comes from, so maybe you can start to override it. Number 1, do my goals excite me? Do I really feel excited about doing it in the first place? Now, I'm not saying that everything you do is going to feel exciting. We have all done things and we've all experienced things in our lives where they don't really excite us, and it's what I call eating the shit sandwich. Sometimes you just gotta get shit done. But essentially what we're asking ourselves is, does this really excite me? Does my job excite me? Does this event I'm trying to motivate myself to go to really excite me? Does that person I'm gonna meet for a drink really excite me? If the answer is no, it might explain why you're lacking in motivation. Now at 8 Model Psychology, we're really interested in those big things, like the work that you do, like you trying to motivate yourself to get to the gym. We look at all kinds of ways that can help you to feel excited about what you're trying to create. And sometimes you have to falsely create that excitement to get to do something. That's eating the shit sandwich. Number 2, are my goals realistic? If you're not actually putting things in place that are realistic and help you move forward, then you are setting yourself up to fail from the very beginning. When things don't feel realistic, we lack a motivation to want to achieve them, and that's where tip number 3 comes in, because one thing that we can do to override that is to put in place small mini goals to get us to where we really want to be. In psychology, this is where we introduce the idea of self-regulation. Self-regulation theory looks at the short-term versus long-term goals that we might have in mind. Now, one of the really juicy experiments that has been done in psychology many times to test this is what's called the marshmallow test, and I personally like to see it done with a massive chocolate cake. It's done with children, and we typically give them a really big, juicy chocolate cake. Now, to test self-regulation, what we're interested to see is whether you have a short-term or long-term goal in mind. So what the experimenter will do is they'll leave the kid inside the room with the cake, and they'll say to them, "Look, I'm just going to nip away for a minute. Now when I've gone, you can have a slice of cake. But if you don't have a slice of cake while I'm away, when I get back, you can have the whole thing." Now it's really fascinating what kids do in this situation, and this really highlights how well they self-regulate. So what their goal is. Is it a long-term goal? Is it to have more cake at the end? Or are they happy just to settle for that tiny little piece? So what we're interested in here is self-regulation. Doing this as a child gives you some indication of what you'll be like as an adult. So in other words, if you self-regulate, if you're good at actually looking forward to that long-term goal and going for the bigger thing at the end of the tunnel, it gives some indication as to how well you will self-regulate as an adult. What we want to do is to set up those small mini goals and self-regulate ourselves to be able to achieve them as we go, so that we can achieve what we ultimately want to achieve at the end of the day. Tip number 4, are they specific? Simply put, what we're interested in here is giving yourself specific instructions in order to achieve something. We often lack motivation when the goal we give ourselves just feels too big to achieve. So we put those mini goals in, but they have to be really specific, to the point where you can literally tick them off a list. Ticking things off a list actually creates motivation because we can see that we're making progress. Tip number 5 is create difficult goals for yourself. Research in psychology tells us that the more difficult the goal, the more likely we are to actually want to go forward and achieve it. First thing that comes to mind is actually a friend I had when I went to university. So I for a little while just coasted along. Suddenly, my friend Sarah created competition for me because she started to get really amazing grades. Clearly, you can tell from this anecdote that I'm very, very competitive, and we will look at competition another time. But ultimately, what Sarah did was she was able to set difficult goals for me. Research shows us again and again that if you give people more difficult goals, then they become more motivated to achieve them. It's almost like having something that's kind of low level is just mundane and blur. You're not feeling challenged. There's no competition. You're not pushing yourself. Tip number 6, knowledge equals results. Ultimately, what we're saying here is that you need ongoing information in order to want to go forward and achieve. Research shows that the more information you get, so in other words, that feedback loop, am I going in the right direction? Am I any closer to achieving it? Actually helps us strive forward and gives us more motivation to go forward for that goal. A really good example of this is losing weight. So if you wanted to lose a stone and no one ever told you whether you were losing anything or not, although that might work for some people, doesn't actually give you the drive and the motivation to keep going forward and trying to lose the weight in the first place. You want to know whether you've lost that pound this week and another 2 pounds the following week. That knowledge, that ongoing I'm going forward actually helps you and gives you the drive and the impetus and the motivation to keep going. The last thing I'm going to talk about, and it's tip number 7, kind of creates a feedback loop to the start, which is about excitement, and that is your purpose. At 8 Model Psychology, we are all about you living your purpose. I know, cheesy. We honestly believe at 8 Model Psychology that if you wake up every day living your purpose, in other words, knowing why you're doing something and actually genuinely wanting to do it every day, that you will genuinely feel more excited, raring to go and wanting to do the thing that you're doing. So just that last question is just for you to really contemplate, am I living my purpose? Am I going to a job every day that I love? Am I spending time with the people that I genuinely feel connected to? Do I actually do what I want to do every day and squeeze a little bit of me time in? What is it that fulfills you? And if you can't answer that question, hopefully some more of these videos will help you figure that out along the way, because purpose is something that we will continue to revisit. I hope you found these useful. Again, they're not so much tips, but more that background knowledge, that insight into the kind of research, the knowledge that we have about the psychology of motivation. And some of these things that we've discussed today might actually give you a little bit of insight into how you're working, and therefore if you start to implement some of these things, the hope is that they really will impact your motivation. We'll be discussing motivation and all sorts of other interesting things here at 8 Model Psychology. I think you know the drill. If you've liked what you've seen today, then definitely click on the link to subscribe and you will get something a little bit more like this in your inbox next week. See you later. Bye.